Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the next sharing panel of VinUni Research Bootcamp. And thank you for joining us here today. And my name is An Kwan, and I major in computer science.
I am Hương Lan, and I major in computer science too, and I'm in the class of 2024.
And now I want to highlight to you that our guests today are very special. Our first guest has been with us once before during a talk about undergraduate research assistant. And we would like to welcome our beloved Dr. Laura van der Ploemen from the College of Health Science. She has led a bit of introduction. She has led the Imperial College London's research design team via a collaborative project led by King's College London in partnership with Imperial, UCL, and Queen Mary University of London. And now she's working as an assistant professor in the College of Health Science. She's also leading a VIN cohort study, which is a longitudinal study of adults and the families of VIN group employees, along with collaboration with VinMed healthcare system.
Yes, joining with Dr. Laura today is Dr. Jenny Kyung-Hwa Chung, and she is currently the assistant professor of marketing in the College of Business. Her research focuses on retailing with interest in the omni-channel consumer experience and retail technology in the retail service context, and she has published research in various peer-reviewed journals such as Journal of Consumer Studies, Clothing and Textiles Research Journal, and also Korean System Dynamics Review.
And this session is created with the aim of getting students started with data analysis. So in today's business world, data analysis plays an important role in making decisions and helping business operate more effectively. And it is applied in various domains such as business, science, and social science domains. Therefore, we are very eager to hear about the sharing from Dr. Laura and Dr. Jenny Chung. Yeah, so let's start with the first question. So I think our beloved students want to know the proper steps to do data analysis. So in order to effectively utilize data, what are some key tasks from the very beginning? Could you help us to visualize every step we need to do a thorough analysis?
Okay, so can you hear me now? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I will go first. First, I'm very happy that I can participate in today's this big event, and normally my research is I do a consumer studies, and what kind of data I use is I do some surveys and or experiments, and doing that I collect the response from how consumers think or how consumers feel and or how they behave based on the given stimulus that I made, and I collected data and I use it. So in about my research, the process is visualize every step we need to do for the thorough analysis. This is from my perspective, whatever kind of research you do, that the good research starts from the good research question, and all the process should be very reasonable, and all the analytical procedure also based on how you can reasonably defend all the comments from the reviewers. So to meet that purpose, just everything, I cannot say just one thing is important through the whole process. Every step is closely related to from the research question and developing hypothesis and collecting data and analysis, and even after analysis. So developing the implications all through should be related, closely related. So even I cannot say it's step should be really has its own purpose and should be really connected smoothly. And visualize every step is like just starting a research question, and based on that, you have to do lots of research review. And actually, students think that currently I'm teaching undergraduate research. Literature review, they don't like it. It's like they just reading the previous knowledge. But based on the previous knowledge, you can develop more. If you don't like that, you cannot do more advanced ones. So based on that, just reading lots of good articles, not bad articles, good articles that is published in good journal. That's the how can you do that? And if you read lots of papers, you will know that which step is really clear and you can understand well. And that's the good research process. And in the good research paper, every step is shown clearly, should be shown. Yeah. So even not the expertise should understand what kind of step this researcher did and went through, and clearly should show that. So that's the process. But in one sense, this is the really best step that you can do, the good analysis. That's really as a researcher, I think it's really difficult. Yeah, that's my comment.
Thank you, Dr. Jenny. And like I've always wondered about like the need to do like literature review. Yeah. So after hearing that, it makes me it helps me to understand the importance of doing literature review.
Yeah,
And,
totally. Can you hear me?
Sorry.
Just
yes.
to emphasize what Dr. Jenny has said about the research question and doing the literature review, those are really the most important things, because you can't even write a hypothesis, can you, until you at least understand the background of the history of the question, and then you sort of you make your question better and better. Because when you write a really good question, that's when you're going to have a good chance of having results that are meaningful. Yeah. So you have to slow it down a little bit, I think.
Yes, so from the sharing of Dr. Laura and Jenny, I believe that good research questions and writing good hypothesis, and also the data collecting process and presenting it clearly on the paper are the most important key point to do the data analysis. I hope that the student can understand the background of data analysis now. Besides, I have one more question. So in the today technology world, I believe that there are a lot of data resources. However, choosing the qualified data and data cleansing plays important roles in data analysis. So what are your tips to ensure that our collected data is credible, and how could we make it clean? What are some characteristics of a good data model? So can I ask Dr. Laura for that question?
Sure. So I think it goes on from what Dr. Jenny was saying, that if you have a good research question, that's like a good foundation. And from there, you read a lot. And once you read a lot, you start to understand things a little bit. So, sorry. But as you start to read, you not only understand about the field and the questions that have already been asked and the questions that have already been answered, but you also start to understand the methods that have been used. So you can say, I want to use this method, but you don't actually know if that method has already been used, or maybe someone tried using it and it didn't work out very well for whatever reason. So that's another reason that you really need to know the literature really well. You start to get an idea of what methods are feasible and what methods make sense for answering a particular research question. So going back to your question about cleaning and having a good data set, once you understand about the methods that might be good for the question that you want to ask, then you can start to understand about how to collect data and what types of data you're going to have from that collection method. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, yeah, so depending on the types of data that you're going to have, the cleaning is going to be different. So if you have a focus group, for example, the type of data that you're going to be collecting will be different from if you're using a questionnaire, by email, for example, right? So I could ask you to consider maybe there are students in the group right now who would like to try to answer how would the data that you would collect be different if you use a focus group talking with people versus a questionnaire that you send by email? Do you think anybody could answer that just from common sense?
I think we can.
So in my work, for example, we ran into this just the other day, that some of the data that we would like to use has been collected by, it's been collected in a way that we wouldn't have designed it ourselves. And so where we would expect to have numerical values, there are actually long text replies. And so we can't analyze the data in the way that we would have liked to, because you have to do an extra step of reading the text and deciding whether the text responses are good enough quality that you can convert those into numerical values or not. So do you start to understand what I mean?
Yes.
So if you're interviewing people, you're going to get answers that those would be written down as text or collected as text. And if you have a questionnaire, then usually some of that would be numerical, categorical, or continuous numerical values, which are easier for a computer to analyze, right? So depending on the type of data that you have, you would clean it in different ways. And cleaning data is a very, very big topic. So I guess once you understand that you have different types of data that would be cleaned in different ways, you can start to think about what would be the best ways to clean different types of data.
Yeah, so given the fact that it is very hard to clean and analyze the data, so how do researchers usually come up with the way to do it? Since I think that analyzing data, it's a very new, like, how do I say it? A new form of researching, since back then we didn't have a lot of data, and now there's so much data for us to work with.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think it goes back to the literature review and knowing the domain really well. So other people will have developed standard methods, and you want to follow those, and you want to explain exactly what you did. So if you have a data set and the data set is in some way needs to be cleaned, you have to describe the methods that you used. Anything that you change from the raw data has to be very clearly explained, what you did and why you did it, and that should be grounded in methods that are established and considered to be the top quality.
And I just want to follow up that with, I'm sorry, Dr. Cheney.
Can I a little bit add more opinions? Yeah, like Dr. Laura said, if let's assume that there is in the world there is 100 of researchers, and there are 100 of research types, and more than 100, because every researcher is going to mix, especially these days, interdisciplinary research is really popular, and there are tons of different types of research. Each research can use different types of data. So if somebody asks how we can just clean all the data set effectively, it's really difficult to say. And even like this kind of topic, like Dr. Laura said, cleaning data and even data analysis, that also itself is a really important research area, like a research methodology. So tons of journals about there, and lots of researchers like statisticians and mathematicians and especially in currently in CBM has a business analysis concentration. So professors who are related in that concentration, what they do is how we can collect the data effectively, how we can use effectively, and in the right way we can analyze that data. That's a really research topic and the one kind of field of academia. So it's very difficult, but like Dr. Laura said, all is like the research is like it's a science. Even if we are social science, it's a science. What science assumes it should be reasonable. We can predict through the reasonable process. So the data cleaning, cleaning is also like to make our insist the persuasion of my research should be make it more reasonable. So all things like should be related correctly, and data cleaning is like I think maybe you guys currently are really asking about maybe because you both belong to the CCS. CCS perspective, maybe you guys can think about the big data things, right? So yeah, I'm teaching that too. So there are tons of data in the world, but how we can use that, it's really difficult. So that's the exact research question. Many scientists are working on how we can use that. Even there are tons of data set, but sometimes if I like develop the really good research question, but then can I adopt any kind of data from the big data world? It's impossible. Then if we get the data, the raw data, how can we cleanse that? There are tons of ways. So but what I want to just ask you is, you don't need to worry about that currently. Even if that's the really small process. And if you have really research question that can improve the world or that can impactful, and in that process, if you have really problems in dealing with the data, many researchers and professors will help you, and that can be solved easily. So data analysis itself is really important topic. So, but like beginners or especially for the undergraduate level, I think maybe you don't need to worry about them at the current stage. So later, yeah, I think and also like Dr. Laura said, the best way to enhance your knowledge about data analysis is reading lots of papers. Why? Because the good papers which is published in top journals, they always use the advanced level of methodology, advanced data analysis way. So we all researchers should be updated using that good articles. So this is really good paper. The author used this analysis method, and they cleaned their data like this. Yeah, so like that we are also studying every day. So that's the way to upgrade your understanding. I hope that this answer can be helpful.
Yes, I think it has helped us to really understand more of what it takes to analyze data. Yeah, and so a bit more about that. So it's just something I've always wondered. So since you're mentioning that we can do a lot of literature review, we can learn from all the researchers from the best papers, but like when you're doing research, how do you, what's the best way to like effectively evaluate your own like data cleaning? Yeah, as in because you are the one that's doing it, right? So is it just like a trial and error process, or is there a way that you specifically do to help you? Yeah.
I think in my case, this is not directly related to your question, but I will share my research experience that are related to data part. Okay, so normally there are, and also I saw the questions related to the data experience. So if I share my experience, normally I conduct like experimental studies. So the weakness of experimental studies because it's experiment, not the real data, right? Not the real consumer, the data from the real consumers. I made conditions. I watched how the prospective consumers, which are participants, are responded to my stimulus. So the weakness point is external validity. If I submit my paper, many reviewers like give me hard comments, and so that comments like, oh, your research is like external validity is very low. You just conducted one experiment. How can you? What if just it happened this time? Can it be applied to other real world? So that's the external validity. So in that case, sometimes I can do more experiments. Yeah, I can like experiment 2 and experiment 3. So I collect more data, and I strengthen my result. Then if I submit again, sometimes I can they accept again. Also, one question was like in the question list from the student. So what if the exactly opposite way of the result are found? That happens. Then normally researchers change the hypothesis. That means because that's the true to our results thing. Even there is one very famous paper. That paper investigated that. So people normally make the hypothesis first, right? But based on the process, if it's reasonably conducted and it's all the scientific way, and it's good research, and the result shows that the hypothesis is different, in that case, our hypothesis can be revised. That happens. Also, in another case is previously I worked on the consumer studies, but lately, I think like you know that so big data is like you guys are interested, are really popular. So I'm trying to work on that, and I have lots of co-authors, so they are really expertise. So actually, you don't need to worry about if you have really worrying about data analysis, you can do that through the collaboration with your friends who are really good at data. That happens a lot in research areas. So yes, I worked on several research papers with my co-authors. It's related to big data, and like you are expecting, there's some data problem. Problem means we don't have enough data. So sometimes we gave up. We could not do that. So still, but we cannot, because we are really want to know the result, and I want to test it. So we are still collecting data. So sometimes research takes a long time, about 10 years collecting all the data and the kind of things. So that happens. We have to do more experiments to collect more data. And sometimes we have to change our hypothesis, and sometimes maybe we have to give up. And not just give up or waiting until that we can get more data. And sometimes that if we wait, and I can see other researchers already published that, who has lots of data. So that happens, yeah. But yeah, that's how the academia grows and academia improves. That's the way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. So actually, I have a small questions in terms of data collecting. So since today, I know that the data analysis and also the data mining is developing, and it also reveals some of the individual information. So I want to ask that is privacy is a concern in collecting data, especially in collecting medical health data? And if yes, how can we cope with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can answer a little bit about that if Dr. Jenny agrees. If that's okay. In terms of privacy is a really important topic, and it has exposed that we have different ways of dealing with privacy in different countries. So just in the last couple of years, you probably noticed that when you go to a website, it will ask your permission to store your cookies, whereas before it never did that. You never got those annoying pop-ups. But the reason for that is that the company or the organization has to ask for your permission to store that information now. And again, it does differ from country to country. But I think the main point is that people's information can't be routinely collected unless they have been informed that that's happening and that they agree to it. So we're really in the middle of a transition in that respect, because a lot of data has already been collected. And going forward, people start to understand more and more the importance of that being discussed rather than that being a given. So I think in practice for the students, what they need to be aware of is that they should read about the international standards for privacy protection and data collection. In the health sciences, this is always going to be bound and protected by an ethics committee. So locally here in Vietnam, there's an ethics committee for research related to medicine that's based at VinMec. And then in other countries, there'll be different ways of organizing ethics committees. But the ethics committee will be comprised of experts as well as lay people, and may have representatives of vulnerable populations, so that they will read the research proposal before any data collection can happen. And then they will make decisions about, usually they'll have comments and they'll suggest revisions to the research itself before they give their approval, because to have the approval of the ethics board is a pretty serious deal. In different fields, I think it's done in different ways, but in general, if you want to collect data from humans, I would recommend that you find out what is your local ethics committee structure, so that you can be attached to it and get their advice before you start going out collecting data. There's also a lot of secondary data that's out there that may already be protected by different agreements and that you will be able to access, but it won't be identifiable. The patient information will have been, or the individual's information will have been separated from what is publicly available. So that's another, so I guess there are two things that the students need to think about. One of them is if they're going to be collecting data directly, and the other one is what to do if they're going to be using secondary data sources.
Thank you very much, Dr. Laura. And before we continue, Dr. Jenny Chung, it was a very pleasant talk, but she has to go for her marketing course. And so we'll see her around. And thank you very much, Dr. Jenny. Yes, and back to the talk. So, Dr. Laura, what you mentioned just now about getting approved by the ethics board. So, what are your thoughts and view about like privacy? Since I think that within the healthcare research, there's a need, there's a lot of need for data. Yeah. So, how do you feel about it? Like, do you consider privacy to be something that hampers your research? And the progress of researching, maybe. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's a great question. So, I mean, since I'm also a human being, I also want my data to be protected. So as a researcher, I would never complain like, oh, this is hampering my ability to do research because I have to respect the privacy of other people. I wouldn't think that. But I think what it is that you have to be aware of what the rules are. Just like any game or thing that you do, you have to know the rules before you step into it. Otherwise, it's not going to work out that well. So the thing that's challenging perhaps for students is that the privacy rules are changing because, like you said, that there's so much more data available than was in the past. And the ability to collect data is facilitated by software that we didn't have before. So there's a kind of like quickly scrambling backwards to figure out what to do about all that. But yeah, in terms of privacy, what do I think personally? I think that the most important, okay, so I could just put the question back to you. Why is privacy important? You know, let's say that, let's say that you have some very sensitive information, or everyone has sensitive information, but let's say that, someone's livelihood or job could be put at risk because of data that becomes made available publicly when they didn't intend for it to be. And I think it was the Prime Minister, perhaps, of Singapore recently had his health data hacked and made publicly available for anybody to see. And it was just sort of an attack, essentially. And that's an extreme case that happened. And I think he came out publicly and wrote that, you know, he didn't mind that, you know, that he wasn't affected by the attack, but at the same time, it's very wrong to take someone's private information and put it into a public sphere without permission. So I think those are the main issues with respect to privacy. And I definitely respect the international standards of data protection. I think that they're important. If you do want to have a large data set on a large number of people, why do you want that? Because, you know, it's like what they say, knowledge is power. So before we go and take all of that, you know, it's important to go to a respected body of experts like an ethics panel or an international panel to ask for permission and to say what you're going to do and to make sure that everything will be protected and agreed upon.
Yes, I agree with you that the privacy is not only about the human rights, but also about your safetyness nowadays. Yes, and I have heard about the data collecting and also the data cleaning part. So now I want to ask about the results of data analysis. So is there a possibility that the result will be different from what we initially expect? And if yes, so what you do? Will you collect more data or modify the research questions?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So, you know, I think it's, you could take it back to a really simple thing. For example, just think of data, don't think of data analysis as something very scary. Think of it as something simple. It's information, it's gathering information, which we do all the time in our regular daily life, don't we? So if we, let's say, we think that our grandmother would like to have, you know, this very special plant for her birthday, right? That's a hypothesis. So what is the best course of action? Should I just go ahead and buy it because I think that she will like it? Or would it be better and perhaps, you know, have a better result if I ask a few people that know her well? Does she already have one? Does she like this plant? Is she allergic to it? And I wouldn't ask random people. I would ask people who are appropriately placed to give the information, wouldn't I? People who actually know the answers. And if I get the back at the end of my information gathering that she is allergic to that plant, do you think I should still get it for her birthday? No. Right, so there's nothing wrong with that. That's just a process of discovery that's based on information gathering. And I think you can think of data analysis and getting results that you didn't expect in the same way. You know, in the same way that you would do the same thing in just your day-to-day life. You would probably adapt your course of action. You wouldn't say, oh, this information is all wrong. I'm still going to get that plant. That would be ridiculous. I think something happened with my audio. Are you?
No.
Oh, okay,
It's
there it goes.
working well.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, I can hear you now. Does it answer your question?
Yes,
I think it
Dr.
does.
Okay, great.
So
Yeah, so
since
moving on
when?
to, oh, sorry, Lang.
Yes, please go on.
So moving on to the next question. So what about the situation of incomplete data? Have you ever encountered that situation? And yeah, so what would that lead to a dead end in the research? Yes.
Yeah, so I really like the questions that we're getting because they expose a lot of assumptions. And of course, that's going to affect the research. It should. So there are 2 or 3 maybe main reasons that we think about when we see data that are missing. So what do you think might be a few reasons? Like if you had a large data set and the data collection was conducted by multiple people, What might be a reason that you might see a blank cell?
So the first one could be the methodology, and then there could also be the the problem of you cannot be sure of the credibility or the whether it's biased or not during the data collection process.
Okay, so I think that's good. You're sort of blending two different answers, but you're close. So one of them you could say is that the research assistants or the people who are in charge of data collection on a day-to-day basis, they really need training to know exactly how to ask the question and how to input the information once they receive the answer. So this is, just one type of data that we're talking about. But in any case, when the data are being collected, whatever it is, whether it's a human or a machine, where the data are being collected, you want to make sure that there's a training process that gets checked and tested to make sure that when the collection happens, it happens the way that you want it to, so that the information is gathered the way you expect it to be. So one reason is that there can be a problem with entering the data, and that can cause missing data. So what's another reason you think you're kind of getting at it with your mention of bias, which is a really, really, really great word in the world of research to be aware of. Okay, I see in the chat that Amita has brought up a point about research and sensitive information coming up. So what is another reason you think that that cell might be blank? You might see a non-response. Can you think of anything? Like, let's say that I'm going to do a survey with you guys right now. Let's pretend. So I'm a researcher and you're the research participant. So do you smoke?
Maybe we're concerned about our safety when we answer the questions.
Yeah, so you might not. There's certain questions that have sensitive information, and you don't want other people to find out. Maybe that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something that everyone accepts, is maybe bad for your health, like smoking. It'd be something that you think is sensitive, but other people don't think it's sensitive because they don't care if that information is made public about themselves, but some people do. So these are another reason why you might see missing data. And if that's the case, then it's really going to affect your research output, your results. So if, let's say that you have missing data because of error in the data collection process that happens across all of the research people who are doing the data collection, that's a different reason for the data to be missing than missing because the person is uncomfortable with that question being asked and that information being gathered. So that can really bias your results if you have data missing due to those types of reasons. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So
yes.
we have lots of things that you can do. So when you take a research methods course, you'll learn in detail how to deal with those types of things.
So Miss Kiều Anh in the chat box have a personal question. So can you give an example of a time when the research project that you were working on did not go as planned?
Yeah, sure. So I do want to say one thing, which is one of the questions that got asked earlier. I wanted to state that in the health sciences generally, when we do a research project, like Dr. Jenny was saying, you really need to work a lot on the research question. You need to read a lot of background information. You need to read not just about the results, but the methods of other researchers. You need to really understand the field before you start planning a new study. And even I would add to that normally in my field, you would write what's called a statistical analysis plan before the data are gathered. So your methods for doing analysis are already established, tested, and practiced before you even start collecting the data, because that process can also sort of key you into realizing that, oh, we need to modify the data collection method a bit, because if we do want to have this statistical analysis plan, the data have to be in this format, otherwise we won't be able to run that test. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of planning, the best research is really just going to be a lot of planning upfront before you run any experiments. So in terms of giving an example of the time when a research project that I was working on didn't go as planned, I can give a really old example because as I've, like more recently, when I do research, it's usually in a large team. A lot of planning goes into it before the research begins and that kind of thing. So usually I would say these types of projects will go as planned. But when I was an undergraduate student and I was in a biology class, we had to do some experiments on some plants and write up our results. So this is kind of, typical, I don't remember exactly what the experiment was, but we had to do something with the plants. And then we had to kind of write up the effect of the intervention on the intervention group of plants. So what happened in my case, the plants were on like the lab equipment that we had, the plants were sitting on like a kind of sponge. And for some reason, the kit that I was given was put in a part of the lab where some soap got spilled into the container. And so the soap got taken up by the plants and all of the plants died. So I was pretty, because, it's just an undergraduate course and they didn't give time for me to redo the experiment. It just I had to write up submit and get the grade. It's just a regular undergraduate course. So I was pretty concerned because I really liked the class and I wanted to do a good job because I really, really like research. So I ended up just writing exactly what had happened. I described, the plants, my hypothesis, what I had planned, and then what had happened with the soap. And then I sort of wrote up my sort of explanation of why I thought it happened, and then the results and so on. I did exactly the same method of describing my research and results that everybody else did, except my plants didn't survive. And in the end, I was actually given a perfect score on the final exam, which shocked me because I thought, my experiment failed. But I think what the professor was trying to teach me there was that experiments can fail for lots of reasons. It's not about creating a perfect result. That's not what it's about. It's much more about explaining what you did in detail, what happened as a result, and then your interpretation of that. So that's my funny biology experiment. Yeah, so research can be messy, like Professor Prunny has put into the comments. That's right.
Yes. So actually, as an undergraduate researcher, I also encounter some of the hard in research areas that I have to change my hypothesis also. And yes, so to follow up, actually, I'm quite curious about the role of data analysis in this COVID-19 pandemic. And how is it in the future, in the near future?
How is the pandemic going to be in the near future? Tell me the question again.
I want to ask about the role of data analysis in the future also.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I can't predict the future. That's why I was making a joke and laughing. But I definitely can't predict the future. But I can say that it will be very good for the students to learn research methods, to read a lot of the literature. And I know that what Dr. Jenny was saying, that the student maybe doesn't want to do literature review because maybe they get lost or they think it's boring or they don't know what is a good paper and what's a bad paper, it's difficult to know when you first start out. You have to get some experience to understand how to assess things like that. But she's really right that going into the scientific literature we have so much more access to it than we ever had before with online libraries. It is a wonderful, wonderful place. And whatever field that you're interested in, I just really recommend that you go deeply into the literature, start reading, ask your professors, who are your favorite authors? Who are your favorite scientists? And ask them for recommendations of papers that you can read, because it's really a great wealth that we have access to, those of us who are interested in pursuing knowledge. We can get it even if we have to stay at home because of COVID or anything like that. We can still read all of that online, which, remember that even when I was an undergraduate student, that wasn't the case. So you guys are really lucky in that respect. So going back to what you were asking, I guess what I would say is that one of the good things that's happened, and COVID has been a really tragic thing for our whole planet, but one of the good things that has happened is that people are a little bit more aware of data collection and data analysis. So people are a little bit more keyed into what it means to be able to gather that data, and what are the places in the world that have more challenges with collecting data, and how that affects their ability to operate. So I think that is a good thing, that people are, regular lay people, are reading statistics in the newspaper every day now, which I don't think that was happening 2 years ago necessarily. And I think what's even better is that people start to question the statistics that they see. So just because they're given a number, they don't necessarily say, ooh, 500, that's so big, scary. But instead they say, well, where did that number come from, and who collected the information, and who does it apply? Does it apply to us, or does it just apply to this group? Or, that's the type of thing that I think is going to happen more and more in the future, because we have data available to us, and also because of this, tragic thing that has happened to all of us. And I will absolutely encourage you well, if I were giving you advice, I would say it would probably help you in the future to learn to program, to use programs like R for data analysis. I do think that again, I can't predict the future at all, and I'm usually wrong, I think, about predicting the future. So you can discount it, but I think quantitative information will become increasingly powerful in the future. So to be able to read it and use it, interpret it, will be a good skill to have. But at the same time, as that grows, the qualitative side of things also grows. And that's a good area. If those types of questions and methods interest you, you should explore those as well.
Thank you, Dr. Laura. And Professor Amita has a question. So how do you deal with outlier data, and how do you determine what is an outlier or not?
Okay, so that's a great question. There are some, I think depending on the field, there will be specific methods for dealing with outlier, but in general, an outlier is something that doesn't look like it fits with the rest of the data for whatever reason. So I think the most important approach to an outlier is to approach it with an open mind, and to ask, just like with any other research question, why is this over here when everything else is over there? So, for example, an outlier could simply be an error in data entry. Like if you're measuring height and weight, and you have a height of like 300 centimeters, do you think that would come up as an outlier in a data set?
Yes, it would.
So what would you do if you saw that?
In
I
my
haven't
case,
really
maybe
thought about
I will try to collect more data to see if the outline significant or not.
So I think the first thing is that if you get a number like that and you know that there are no humans that have that height, then you have to ask yourself, why is it there? And it you know, it's probably just an error. So you have to usually in my field, you would have written in your statistical analysis plan in advance of collecting data what you would do with a value like that. So one approach is that you can count it as the missing. There are lots of different approaches. One thing that you could do if you have the reasonable understanding, you can give like an average value for that from the data set. But I think that that's a very, you have to look at the specific project and see what it is that you're looking at and make sure you apply a method that is appropriate. Does that answer the question? Yeah, so you have to say, why is it there? So you can't just throw it out because it's an outlier. I think that's what I'm trying to say. You have to understand, why is it there? What happened there? And it could be actually giving you information that you need to change your data collection method. Because if you're getting weird results like that from your data collection method, there might be something wrong that's affecting other results as well.
Yeah, so I think that's one of a very relevant questions to students, because we're still very new to research, and then when we encounter such situations, we don't usually know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so in going back to my experience with the biology lab, I think that I would be in favor of saying exactly what happened, explaining why you think it happened, and just leave it at that. And then, if like I said, like if you're, later on, if you're more senior and you have got something that's telling you that your data collection method is off, then you would go back to your team and say, I think we need to change our methods or look at this because something is not right.
And Dr. Laura, we've come to the end of our sharing session. Yes, and thank you very much for today, for agreeing to join us today. And it has been a very enjoyable session, and you've definitely shown us what it means to collect data and data collection, and different perspectives on it. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much for including me. I hope you guys all get inspired to get involved in research.
And definitely. And before we end the session, is there something you would like to say to the viewers?
Sure. So I do see that there's another question in the chat about data transparency, and that's a big topic. So I think it depends on the field that you're in. But in my field, for example, just last year in the International Journal of Epidemiology, which is one of the most respected journals in epidemiology, they were talking about a sort of initiative to make data for cohort studies, which are large, expensive studies, to make the data open source so that other people can benefit from using them. So it's a little bit like opening up a library to the public, letting people have a look at the data and draw their own conclusions. So I'm absolutely in favor of that. I think it's a basic scientific principle to make things easy to replicate and to see how things were collected and what they looked like in the raw form. There are lots of barriers to that in different places for different reasons. So But I think it is going in that direction, that in general, especially large data, bless you, will be, there'll be some expectation about providing your data set in addition to your analyses so that people can go into the data set. And it's easy to do now because when you publish in at least in the health sciences, when you publish in a journal, they'll have a word limit. So you can't, obviously in the print version, your data set's not going to be made available, but you can put your data on GitHub or other places like that. And then you can add that as a link within the paper so that in the paper, essentially people reading your paper and then they see on the first figure, this is the figure that we came up with. And then in the figure notes, it will have the link to the data set. So people, and even the code, so that people can click on the link, go to your data set, run the same code that you ran, look at your code, and then they can say, right, I understand why they did what they did. And they can still argue with you and they can say, I don't think you should have made this variable in this way. I would have done it that way. But at least it's transparent so that you have an open space that can be discussed. Yeah, definitely in favor of that. And it's beneficial to scientists as well, because it's easy to be biased as an individual person. But if everyone's looking at you, at your things with you, and then you get more perspectives and better ability to see where you might be biased. So, yeah.
Yes, I agree with you that when I find a paper with a GitHub link, very excited to receive the code. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, but again, not every field has that kind of capability or training. So I think it's going to be in different fields, it will be different over time. Yeah, thanks again, everybody. Really nice to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Laura.
Thank you very much, Dr. Laura.
Bye.
And have a nice day.
You too. Good luck with your research.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so coming to the end of our session, thank you everyone for coming here today. And now's the magic code, Data Matters, with the D and the M in capital. And yes, guys, get that point to get your the awesome merchandise. And then coming up next would be the getting started with data management planning at 1 p.m. So make sure to be there and enjoy the session and have fun. Yay. Thank you, Professor Amita. And guys.
See you in the next section.
Yes. And that would be the end of the stream. We'll let the code run for a few more minutes, and that's it. Goodbye, everyone. Have a nice day.
Goodbye, everyone.
Drink some water. Yeah.